What will 2023 hold for the agriculture sector? In 2020, the sector saw growth amounting to just under 15%, while in 2021, that figure was slightly lower at around 8%. We'll have to wait until March to see how much growth was recorded in 2022. So for now, let's look ahead and discuss the growth outlook with Wandile Sihlobo, Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, and he joins us virtually from Pretoria. Wandile also pens one of my favourite columns quite regularly in the Sunday Times. We will be part of our discussion today. Wandile, Happy New Year to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I have to get this out of the way because it's all anybody in our office we're talking about. First, close to the end of this year, there was a viral tweet about the pricing of potatoes, and it really got set the cat amongst the pigeons. And we started this year with another viral tweet about potatoes, and I blame Sizwe Dlomo for this because he's normally at the source of these kinds of things on Twitter, especially when he tweeted, "You guys do realize that there's a potato shortage in South Africa?" And then everybody says, "We have to ask Wandile. He's the guy that will be able to tell us." Is there a potato shortage in South Africa, and do we need to be worried, Wandile?
Happy New Year, Marcel. I think we shouldn't be worried as South Africans about the potato supplies. Sizwe is a good friend, and we did actually talk about this with him after I had seen the tweet. What is happening is that the supplies are relatively lower than where we typically have. For example, we would have over 10 million tons of the bags of the potatoes that we would have there. But right now, the bags are just around about 600,000 tons. So the supplies are low. But that has a lot to do with weather conditions. It's been fairly rainy in some other areas, but we are also going to be harvesting at some point soon, and see our supplies improving. So South Africans shouldn't worry about this. And in fact, the bags of 10 kg of potatoes is still around about 60 rand at this point. In fact, those are the prices of today. If you go to any market to buy a bag of potatoes at 10 kilogram, you'll get into that. So no need to worry.
Now, Wandile, we're just coming out of a festive period where many South Africans, especially our first festive post the COVID lockdown, where many South Africans fanned across the country, took to the road, drove through areas that we haven't gone through as often as we should. And I love doing that because I particularly love the Karoo, and I always try and get a sense of where that part of the country is at, because rural South Africa is so important to our country's development. Now, you and some colleagues took a trip like that towards the end of 2021, and you wrote about it in the latest Sunday Times. But you did so not for tourism reasons and for good Karoo lamb and red wine, but you met with agri-business bosses just to get a sense of where this very important sector is at. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, give me an idea of how hopeful you are, or what you think. What was the sense that you got, before we get into the details of what you think should be our focus areas? What was the sense that you got of these very important agricultural rural areas of South Africa after a few rather difficult years for the country?
Marcel, I'm sitting relatively optimistic at this point, because when you drive around South Africa, it was green and lush and visible from a road that people are working the land. But of course, there are areas that have received more rain than they've budgeted for, and that requires a bit of replanting, which is what the farmers are currently doing in some areas. Here, I'm thinking of the southern parts of the Free State, part of Eastern Cape, but broadly, I would say conditions are looking relatively positive. And this is the picture that one sees either you are driving down in the Midlands, in Richmond, KZN, Eastern Cape, and even parts of the western parts of South Africa. So I would say we are at a slightly optimistic period, regardless of the damages in certain parts of the country that might have caused by the excessive rains.
Now, you would have paid close attention to comments coming from government and how much focus is being put on this important sector, being the agricultural business. What is the sense that you're getting? We know that a vagueness in policy has been an unending issue. You've written about it a lot over the years, and that more detail in terms of policy towards agriculture is needed. But one thing that we do know we need, and you've written about it quite a bit, is a need for an investment in infrastructure. I mean, just being on the road over festive, you can't help but notice that there are more and more trucks on the road, because this is what's needed to distribute our goods from the agricultural areas to the important nodes of distribution. a year on, is that still an issue? What have you seen in terms of improvement, and what do you think is still needed?
I think that is one of the most difficult issues that is confronting the farmers right now, because if you were to go to people and ask them how is agriculture doing, they were going to go show you the picture that I've just said, that conditions look relatively favorable on crops and on livestock, with all of the other difficulties at a minor level, like, for example, animal diseases and things that farmers are tackling. But if you were to ask them to say broad themes, what needs to be addressed by private sector as well as the government, the key thing that everyone is worried about at this point is the poor state of our roads. To say rural roads needs to actually be improved. And this is very important because South Africa's agricultural sector is export oriented, which means much of what we produce, about half of what we produce, in fact, in value terms, goes to export markets. Now, getting that produce out of your farm and making sure that it reaches the ports, it reaches the supermarkets at which we buy from, that has become a much more difficult challenge over the recent years. And I think the heavy rains of this summer and the last summer have even exacerbated the problem. So the municipalities and some of these small towns, they really need to up their socks on resolving this issue. And in addition to that, I would say, of course, the challenge for everyone is the energy supply, and thereafter, it's a broadening of our export markets. Those are the core problems that I think if we can resolve, we can see agriculture even giving us better gains than what we are currently enjoying at this point.
Now, one of the best performing sectors in the agricultural industry, I'm sure you will agree, was the citrus industry, especially as a knock-on effect of changing lifestyles and needs during the COVID pandemic. But then that industry was hit quite bad, close in the second half of last year, with new rules and regulations put in place from Europe, and that had a massive impact on a very important export industry, being our citrus products. What do you think are the biggest learnings in terms of how government representatives as well as the citrus industry was able to deal with that situation? What can we learn from that? Because that kind of thing is going to happen again, and it's going to hit our agriculture industry. And as you've just said, it is export oriented, and we do need to put more resources behind it.
Yeah, I think from a philosophical level, we really all need to know that when we engage on international trade, we're engaging as South Africa Inc., not as a private sector or as a government. Therefore, we have to come out as a country with the united vision of saying we are driving exports of the agricultural products from South Africa to the world. And that will mean then there will be a bit more alignment and working together, both of our parties, when we engage on issues like this. This is one of the key things, this collaboration that we saw being a success in a different case of wool in China. And I think right now with the citrus industry, that's that cooperation which we'll need to have. And I think that the South African government also appreciates this, because if you were to look into the export balance sheet of South Africa's agricultural products, citrus is usually either at the top or the second, but it's somewhere at that spot. So if it's such an important export product, then that means that engaging with the EU and the others in a more constructive way as a country, collaborative government and private sector is the one important things. And we'll have to continuously engage with all of those existing markets which we work with. And the second point here, which is very important also, is that we need to expand our reach for markets beyond to countries that we already export to. Here, I'm having in mind to say, can we expand our footprint for citrus and other products in China, in India, in Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia? Those are the growing and important markets that I think there's an alignment in vision between private sector and the South African government. But this time around, 2023, we really need to be a bit more aggressive in making sure that we open those markets for the products.
One final question before I let you go, just in terms of what you've just said there. Is our industry too Europe-centric when it comes to those traditional lines of trade? And where would you like to see an improvement in that?
It's not so much Eurocentric, because take 2021, we exported a record of $12.4 billion of agricultural products. 40% went to Africa, 25% to Europe, and a bit to Asia and the others. So now we need to expand our footprints in the Middle East, as well as some of these countries that I was mentioning, which is China, India, Bangladesh, South Korea, Saudi Arabia being the key ones. And I think if we can expand those markets while improving the roads, dealing with crime, and assisting Transnet as they deal with the challenges at the ports. And so far, I think they are working well with the industry. Then I think we can see the sector thriving, and that thriving of the sector will also enable even the new black players that are coming into agriculture to be able to participate fairly well.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. It's always an education chatting to you. Thank you so much. That is Wandile Sihlobo, Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa.